Hey there, this is Natalie, and in this video I want to talk about a character who is very important in the current arc of Mushoku Tensei Season 2 Part 2. And no, it's not Roxy for this video, but it is Thirsty Elf and Rudy's surprise grandmother-in-law, Elinalise. Now, in the part of the story currently in the anime, we see that Elinalise is still afflicted by her curse that causes her to have to sleep with men or face a potentially fatal buildup of magic in her body. Cliff promised he would find a cure when they got together, and in the meantime, he understands that she will have to have sex during her trip to the Beggarit continent, and they have an understanding about this. When Elinalise does have to take care of this issue, she prefers to use male escorts rather than create any complicated emotional situations, and Cliff understands that she's emotionally loyal to him and that managing the curse is literally a matter of life and death for her, and really not her fault. It's easy to understand logically, but it still feels sad and uncomfortable for both the audience and for Rudy himself that this couple has to live this way. So, what a lot of people want to know is, does Cliff ever succeed in curing Elinalise? I will be talking in detail about this, so there will be spoilers and background lore from the prequel Old Dragon's Tale, as well as speculation about the sequel, so you have been warned. But before that, real quick, a reminder that due to serious financial struggles, I am offering various services like fiction editing at way below normal market rates, and you can commission me for these or just make a donation to support the channel and help me not become a stray cat on my Ko-fi page. It's linked in the description. To add some extra spice to this though, because I really am that broke, I've also said on X that I will post a current bikini photo if I get enough donations on Ko-fi or Patreon to alleviate my current various emergencies. I know that sounds like a slippery slope to doing OF, but actually it was just a silly thing that came up with my Twitter followers the other day when I posted an old beach picture that I found on my private Facebook page, you know, just for a bit of a laugh. And people wanted to see a more current one. I'm really camera shy and I only take a few selfies a year, so I was like, no. But if it could help sort my problems out, then I'm open to it. So anyway, there's that. Save your local cat girl and I'll tweet something that I really wouldn't normally. Still, speaking of very desperate women, what is going to happen with Elinalise's curse? Well, Cliff will continue to research curses, and he will have some success in alleviating the effects of Elinalise's problem, using basically curse-negating panties that she can wear. But while he does manage to get these to be effective enough that Elinalise will be able to go for a year without sex, without facing the effects of the curse, he never actually cures it completely. A year does end up being enough that she can remain faithful, however. Cliff does move back to Milishon after graduation because he wants to play a role in the church and perhaps to eventually become Pope, the current Pope being his grandfather. Unlike the Catholic Church, that the Milish Church shares some aesthetic and structural similarities with, the Milish Church doesn't require senior figures to be celibate and unmarried men. So, Cliff having a wife and child wouldn't typically be a problem, but Elinalise's race might. In Milis, the main conflict within the church is between pro and anti-demon race factions, and Cliff's family is on the pro-demon race side. However, while the main discrimination in the country is against demon races, the non-human races from the Great Forest, like elves, beast people and hobbits, also face a lot of prejudice. Cliff believes that he can work in Milis to move things in a direction where his elf wife and half-elf son will be finally accepted, but that it's better for everyone if Elinalise stays back in Rannoa with their son Clive and all of Rudeus's family while he's working on that. It's a long journey for them to visit each other, but later in the story, as Rudeus and his allies begin using teleportation circles fairly commonly for fast travel, this makes it much easier. So, with her curse alleviated for up to a year and chances to be with her husband at least that often, Elinalise doesn't have to have casual encounters with other men to stay safe and well. This might almost sound like a bad deal for Elinalise, but remember that she's a long-lived elf, so a year isn't really a long wait for her, and for the first time, she's able to raise one of her children properly, live among friends and family who accept her as she is, and she can participate in things where she can be a useful adventuring asset without the added pressure of keeping her curse at bay. So while she misses Cliff, she's pretty happy during this arrangement. Cliff's research then did achieve his goal of allowing her to live a fairly normal life and allowing her to be faithful, which is, from a practical perspective, just about as good as curing it. I mean, she does have to use the magic panties and she still does need sex after a certain amount of time, but as long as she does those things, she's got no worries from her curse, and Cliff doesn't have to accept her sleeping with other men. But I think it's interesting that the author chose to find a solution for Elinalise and Cliff that doesn't remove her curse. And this is because I think he had a plan for Elinalise's curse to be useful in the sequel all along. Elinalise's curse may seem like simply a unique challenge that character has that plays into her storylines and relationships, much like, say, Zenoba's Miko strength. But actually, I think it plays into the overarching story in a bigger way than that. That's not to say I think Elinalise is going to be some sort of key to everything type special one character in the ultimate battle against Hitagami in the sequel, but just that I think there will be a payoff to her curse that will tie a lot of things together. This is because it is very likely that Elinalise is actually the character Rostelina who features in Old Dragon's Tale. I have a full video explaining all of this called Elinalise's Surprising Origins, which I'll link to on the end card, so I won't go into the whole story here. But essentially, Rostelina was an elf girl who was exiled from her village. This was because she produced dangerously large amounts of mana. She ended up being saved by Laplace and living with him as a kind of housekeeper who also helped look after his tame dragon. Laplace is there because his own world, along with 4 others, were destroyed in moves orchestrated by Hitagami, which is basically the story the prequel Old Dragon's Tale tells by itself. The book frames it as Laplace telling his life story to Rostelina, over the course of many years of them living together. Once Laplace has finished telling his story to Rostelina, she's learned that the god of the dragon world sent his son Orsted to the future of the world they're in now, and that is the world where Mushoku Tensei takes place. Orsted will be coming to defeat Hitagami, and Laplace is currently doing things to help Orsted with that when he eventually arrives. This story is thousands of years before Rudeus arrives, so Orsted's arrival is still very far in the future. Rostelina is moved by the story and says that she wants to help Orsted too, asking if there's any way that she can. Laplace thinks and then tells her that there is something. He knows that Orsted will have very slow mana regeneration, which in fact does turn out to be his only real weakness. Laplace believes that he can modify Rostelina's body so that the excess mana she produces can be stored, and so she could basically produce mana batteries that Orsted could use. Now, it's unlikely that his intention was for this to be done by her being inseminated by men. Laplace is about the most asexual character you can think of, and Rostelina is a sheltered girl who comes across as very innocent, so that would be very strange. But he also didn't intend that she'd lose her memories. He says that that is a concern, but that as long as he can tend to her throughout the process, it shouldn't damage her mind. The last we see of them, he has her in a kind of magical incubator, and he's looking after her. So, it seems like the events that caused Laplace to be split into Technique God and Demon God, forgetting his original purpose, happened before things were complete, and Rostalina remained preserved for centuries without him there to tend to her. Elinalise was found about 200 years before the start of Rudeus' story by Rudeus, and she was found in a dungeon encased in crystal. She had no memories, but she did have a curse, which meant excess mana would build up in her body and kill her if she didn't have sex with men, which basically causes her to give birth to valuable magic crystals. Elinalise's body basically does what Laplace had intended Rostalina's to do, though maybe not in the way he intended. And she does have the amnesia Laplace had said was a risk if he couldn't tend to her. This would mean Elinalise's curse could actually be useful, allowing her to supply Orsted with mana stones and reducing his limits. This would of course mean that a solution that didn't cure Elinalise would be necessary for the author, to be able to give her a normal relationship in the story while still having a longer term plan in mind for the character. It may seem strange that nobody in world, that we know of in Mushoku Tensei and Redundancy at least, has figured out that Elinalise's magic stones could be used in this way. But I think it's acceptable because Orsted's slow mana regeneration isn't common knowledge, that being his one limitation, and most people also probably don't know about the particularities of Elinalise's curse with the stones. They just know that it makes her necessarily promiscuous. There are certainly plenty of characters smart enough and inventive enough to think of it, but given nobody's really focused on looking for a way to help with Orsted's mana regeneration, I do think it's plausible for the idea not to be raised until the sequel. But there you have it, what happens with Elinalise's curse, and the likely reason it doesn't get cured despite all of Cliff's efforts. But what do you guys think? Let me know in the comments. As always, thank you to my supporters on Patreon and to those who hire me or donate to me via Ko-fi. I can't tell you how much you guys have helped with some really bad situations recently. I'll be back very soon with a video about Roxy, so I hope to see you then.